So we need Ian, you're there. Fantastic. Welcome, Arvind. Your mic is on, right? So we can hear you.
Hi, yep, I'm here.
Oh, Ian, okay. We can't see your handsome face there.
I'll see what I can do about
that. Well, there we are. Fantastic.
Yeah, but is it handsome? Sorry.
Yes. It's personality, handsome for me, the same thing. Right?
Wonderful, thank you.
No. And we're on Candice. I did see her. She was here. So let me just see. Welcome to all three of you. I do a quick introduction, then we'll get into the session. So we have, in the way the screen is on top left, is Professor Arvind Gupta, who's the CEO of Pellet. He's also the professor in charge of the computer science at University of Toronto, and done some very good things. I've known him also for a long time, and he can tell you more also about himself. In the bottom left, we got Ian Seward, who's the head of SFIA Foundation. For those who don't know what that is System Framework for Information Age, and we're partners. We're going to be doing a lot more stuff on SFIA very soon. So this was a kind of called partial introduction. And on your right of the screen is Candice Faktor, who also has a very solid background. She is a founder, started the Game Changer Mastermind, co-founder, I think, or maybe full founder, and done many other things. And you'll see as we go through talk about it. So I thought, although we've talked about a few things, why don't we start with, if you talk about what you see are the problems. One of the things, Pellet, there's a session after this, so we'll talk about Pellet there. So this one, we'll be talking about the challenges we see out there. Same thing we'll do with SFIA. We're going to have a full session. But what are the challenges each of you see? Why don't it take 3-4 minutes to park the issue, then we can drill down as to what you think are the challenges out there. So why don't we start with you, Candice?
Sure, it's great to be here. Just maybe a little bit more about my background.
Sure.
You may have noticed yesterday Wattpad sold in our ecosystem, and I think it's actually very relevant to what we're talking about today, which is how do we create more Wattpads? And I had the real privilege of being the global GM and head of business at Wattpad for a number of years, and I moved on. Actually seeing the challenge that there aren't enough people in our ecosystem who have access and exposure to that kind of technology and that kind of creativity that I think is going to be very important for the future. And so, what do I see as the challenges? I see that it's very polarized. There's 6 million people unemployed right now in Canada. And, at the same time, we can't find enough tech talent and talent that has the skills we need to actually grow successful startups. And so what I'd like to see in our country is more emphasis on the skills that we need to really thrive in the future. And that's why I started Game Changer. Game Changer is an innovation advisory firm and fund where we work on helping companies with leadership around innovation. And it ultimately comes down to talent, right? Is giving people the right mindset and the right skill set to actually deal with the very thing that we've had to wrestle with this year, which is uncertainty and change. So, I am very, very passionate about making sure people have access to learning experiences. And as a result, we've actually just started a new company called Mastermind, which is a cohort-based live learning platform because it deals with another problem we have in society, which is, institutions aren't accessible for everybody. Yet there are some incredible teachers and learning experiences that we want to make more accessible. And that's what our platform does, is it lets anybody run a live learning platform.
Fantastic. Ian.
Okay, well, perhaps I should say something a little bit about the SFIA Foundation as to actually why you've asked me to speak. Right. The SFIA Foundation, it's a global not-for-profit. We have developed, we developed it back in the year 2000, a skills and competency framework, which covers the breadth of IT and a number of business-related functions outside of IT. It's really a common reference model. It was built in the UK by UK industry as a collaboration, and there was no intent to go global. And we haven't gone global. Global has taken us. So we are now a global foundation because we simply make the framework available for others to use. And as a result of that, it is now a global collaboration. Simply, we update every 3 years from all users all around the world who make contributions to what the content should be. We've never promoted it. It's just simply been picked up all around the world for the simple reason they find it useful. And I think the previous speaker, Matthew, mentioned that, and this will come on to, if you like, one of the key aspects we need to deal with. He mentioned that if you can't measure something, you can't control it. I would attribute that quote to almost a century and a bit ago to Lord Kelvin, who said exactly that. One of the key problems, I think, is we talk about a skills gap, but we can't describe it. And then the question comes down, what is it? Is it a skills gap? Is it a knowledge gap? Is it a behaviors gap? Is it an attitude gap? We need to be able to describe it. And SFIA helps in one of those areas. I think one of the other things we need to look at is new approaches to ensuring people have the skills. We talk about the number of youth unemployment all around the world. It's not a Canada problem. It's not a UK problem. It's a problem all around the world. And the reality is it's also going to be a problem for not youth unemployment, but later life unemployment. And later life could mean 40 years old, 40. And I think we need to do something to make sure that people are able to do the work they want to do throughout the years that they want to work. And we're not good at that. And I think the final thing that is an issue for me is it isn't just an IT problem. It isn't a cybersecurity problem. It isn't a technology problem. It's a social problem that we haven't worked out how to deal with that. More and more over the last 10 years, probably, businesses have treated people as commodities and tried to make them more a commodity because it's easy to buy commodity. The problem with that is you don't have loyalty of your workforce. You don't have a workforce that actually wants to do necessarily a very good job. They might be looking for their next role because they don't feel valued. I think there's so much more we need to do to actually make sure that aspects of people's attitudes and behaviors are reflected in what society wants from them, not what society demands in terms of the way it treats them, because people do what their bosses value. They don't do necessarily what is the right thing to do. And that's a very hard thing to change. So I'll leave it there. I'm sure that some of those things will be questioned, but yeah. I'll leave it there for now.
Oh, they're powerful, very powerful. So, but we'll come to that because I think they're very important. So, Arvind, sir.
Yeah, first, thank you for inviting me here. And both Candice and Ian, I couldn't agree more with all the things you've said. I just want to step back just step back a little bit, and to understand that when there's economic transformation, when we're doing a wholesale transformation of the economy now because we're bringing automation in writ large, it doesn't mean that it's only the IT sector that's changing. All sectors are changing. And that means that the way we allocate resources has to change. We cannot do things today that work for a manufacturing economy from 60 years ago. This is not new. We saw this in the Depression of 1820, the Depression of 1870, 1930. Each time we saw a massive economic transformation, we saw a misalignment of resources. You cannot use the model, Ian talks about viewing people as a commodity. That actually worked a different kind of economy. It does not work in today's economy. So what is today's economy? It's very service oriented, labor intensive instead of capital intensive. fast moving, knowledge is disrupting even existing knowledge companies. Small companies are the drivers of the economy, which means we need a very nimble, highly skilled workforce that we can allocate to wherever growth is happening. And this idea that we need to be able to skill people for the highest potential parts of the economy is something we're just not used to. You know, I work in a university, and reasonable, if we decide to do a new, and we're an educational institute, not even a skilling institute, but if we decide to do something new, you're talking about 4 years to create the program, 8 years to produce people. In an economy that moves at the speed of 2-3 years, you just cannot use those old paradigms. So I like us to separate education from skills. Education is foundational. It's the ability, it teaches you how to acquire new skills as you need them. Now the question is, how do you give people those skills? And the first thing we should recognize is people can learn their whole life. You know, I go to so many talks where they say, we have this big skills gap, let's create a university program so we can produce 22-year-olds to fill the gap. 35-year-olds can learn things, 40-year-olds can learn new skills. They can go and do these jobs. We just haven't created the mechanisms to make that happen. And I think this is going to be one of the big challenges of our time. What are the mechanisms? And, you know, both Ian and Candice talked about that. We need mechanisms to create this, to give people the skills as they need them in the parts of the economy that are trying to absorb those skills. That is the skills gap. The skills gap and this mismatch is because we're not creating the transition pathways for people. And this is why we created Palette Skills, to figure out how to build those transition pathways, support businesses that are looking to grow, sometimes explosive growth, sometimes because they're transforming, but they need skilled people to get success. And the best repository of skilled people are some of those 6 million who are potentially unemployed, or maybe the 15 million who are underemployed and not fully using their capacity. So we're working on a cybersecurity program. We have people with masters and PhDs in quantitative fields who are working at way below their potential, but they can address some of the gaps. Now, how do you identify the gap? How do you do that skilling is a whole interesting discussion. I invite you to come to the next panel where we'll talk about how Palette does it. But the bigger picture is we've got to start thinking about how to move people in the economy as we need them.
This is very interesting. Yeah, the next panel will be very interesting. There are a couple of things that stand out. You know, we talk about economic transformation, which is true. Isn't one of the challenges that we make, our decisions that we make as a government, as a companies, as a whatever system, are short-sighted, right? Very short-sighted, not just educational. And so what happens here? Case in point right now is the coronavirus, and we don't have vaccines available in Canada when Canada was leader with Connaught laboratories and all that, many years ago, and we found insulin and all that. We now have to buy these things from other people. So we did not put, exactly as what you're saying, resources in the right place or upskill them or apply them, because it was short-sighted. Partly profit making was one of the main reasons, because we worry about shareholder value, and you heard all through the day that needs to change. So that's one part. And you talked about it takes a long time to ramp up people, which is yet another challenge. So have we stopped teaching people critical skills? Is that one of the problems? Right? Go ahead, go for it.
Yeah, so my view on this is we are living in a society that has an industrial system or framework for education. And, you know, we talked a little bit about commoditizing talent, and I think that's part of it. But the other part of the industrial era was very much one of specialization. And, you know, we told people, don't be generalists, don't understand things holistically, don't think about things from an integrative perspective, go and get super specialized. And I think what has happened is that we have lost the ability to see things from a broad perspective for many people. And, you know, ultimately creativity and entrepreneurship is about holistic thinking. And I think that's a really, really big challenge for our universities today. And it's been very motivated by the economic drivers of becoming hyper-specialized. I only have my HBA, my Bachelor of Commerce. And, my story is I went into strategy consulting. I worked for Monitor Group for many years, and I just didn't understand why I would benefit going back for an MBA. And quite frankly, it was just my personal story was I was really enjoying the work I was doing. I felt I was learning so much on the job. But there's a narrative that a lot of people are told, which is go and get more and more and more degrees, but I'm not sure it equates to more and more opportunity.
That's a very interesting.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, yes, I have a degree, but the most competent people I've worked for, some have had degrees, some have had PhDs, and some have had absolutely no qualifications whatsoever. And I think it's the system we have at the moment for education, and I don't want to criticize it because it's worked very well to a large extent, but the system we have of education is probably the same system we had 150 years ago. The mindset was you go through school, you go to a university. That is the education system. I certainly think it's changed dramatically in the last 18 months, mainly because of COVID. Now you go to university and all your lectures are online. Well, why do you go to university if they're all online? I think there are major changes that need to be made and will be made. And quite simply, why should it be that you go at 18 or 19? Why can't you pick up components of your education throughout your entire life? Kids now can program. 12-year-olds can write good programs, whatever good means. I wrote my first commercial-oriented program when I was 21, 22, when I got my first job. Now, the point that I think Candice made was absolutely spot on. We want people that are flexible enough to pick up new skills rapidly. I remember when I changed jobs the first time, I had been working 4 years. I applied for a job. I can't tell you what it was because it was in the defense sector, but I went to the interview and the interviewer said, "This is what we want you to do." And I said, "Well, I think you've got the wrong candidate. I don't know anything about that." And they said to me, "Well, nor do we. That's why we're recruiting someone." "And how did you know about what you did when you did all these amazing things on your CV?" And I said, "Well, I just went away and found out." And he said, "That's what we want someone to do here." And all of my jobs that I've been given, all of the tasks I've been given, haven't been given to me because I'm the best person for that role. They've been given to me because I was available. And I either made a good job of it or I left and moved on. And I think we're not able to capitalize on the flexibility of people.
That's absolutely a very good point. Arvind, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, one of my worries is this really hard push for universities to teach a skill that will get you a job at the get-go. And, I'm a professor of computer science. Our students do great. They come out, they get very high-paying jobs as coders or whatever, software engineers. But I think the future is really in a broad-based liberal arts education, because that's what teaches you how to be flexible in what you do. First of all, core foundational skills like communication, problem solving are transferable skills for a lifetime. Now, I'm not against learning some technical things in university. I think that, having literacy in mathematics is really important. I think having some computational thinking will be important for anyone to operate in the modern economy. But if we think that education is all about graduating and getting a high-paid job on day one, we're missing something, because that's what creates the commodity effect. Right? I happen to know the 3 programming languages that are used today, so someone hires me. 5 years from now, we move on, and if I haven't been keeping up with the skills, I won't be hireable. But if you train people in university, educate people so that they're always flexible, they're always capable of learning new things, they're always able to identify what they need to learn, they have the tools to find the ways to be retrained whenever they need to be retrained. Now you have a flexible, nimble workforce that's moving at the speed of the knowledge economy. And so when you ask companies, it's really interesting. When you ask companies, what are they looking for in workers? They actually identify the things that you learn in a liberal arts education. And so when we talk about a holistic education, I would say it's a broad-based education. And the other thing that we're noticing is when we take graduate students, and even in computer science, we get better students and more interesting students who have not just spent all their time just learning in a very narrow set of computer science courses. Students who've taken courses in the arts, who've taken physics, who've taken a broad, what I would call a liberal arts education, actually make more interesting graduate students because they've got a big base to draw on as they specialize. But if you start specializing at day one, you don't actually know all the things that are around you that can help guide you. So I think again, we have to start thinking of education and skills as different pieces, because we need to skill people based on the fact they're well educated.
So this, you guys have put up a fabulous picture. So here's a question now from the different side that we haven't talked about, which is that is this the result of the fact that the corporate world is so siloed that they go to universities and colleges and schools looking for people in silos? Because I'll tell you, I had a long conversation with the big technology suppliers, vendors. And I said, why are you guys looking at this problem like this? The problem is this, right? And they said to me, well, we can't talk to them like that. They don't want to hear it. They want to hear the guy who's in charge only wants this part because they're siloed in the corporate world. And that's compounded the problem. So thinking has to change from the corporate world that we need journalists, if that's the term we can use. And therefore you go across on the other side saying you might want to produce people who understand, therefore cross-skilling, upskilling is a definite issue. Would you believe that that's contributed to this problem?
Well, in part, but again, first of all, I never want to blame anyone. People make decisions that they need to make to run their business, but not necessarily the case that we don't have another layer. So education and skill, if you think of them as separate, a strong education may allow you to quickly pick up the skills that employers are looking for today.
Right.
And so, when again, the economy is basically being run, I'll give you a statistic, 73% of net new jobs in the US are created by the 5% fastest growing SMEs. Those companies are growing from 200 to 500 employees in year one and 500 to 1,000 in year two. Even if you think they should spend a lot of time giving skills to people, they don't have time. They're growing at explosive rates. So now how do you create a skilling system on top of an education system that gets people moved into those jobs quickly? Because those companies are in a race against their competitors to get market share. So I think, again, we have to think of the dynamics of a knowledge economy where the right piece of knowledge can actually take over a big space of the economy where you get this explosive growth. How do you skill for that kind of economy?
Yeah.
I was going to say that I think that's a hugely interesting point, but we are also looking at a large number of organizations that aren't doing that. And those are large, if you like, legacy type organizations, often public sector, providing a service to the community, to the citizens as a whole. They're not high tech. I don't know that I should say this, but I would hate to work in IT today. I really would. I started working with computers, if you like, before there were beige boxes on everybody's desk. I started working on them when they were 4 megahertz microprocessors and they had no operating systems and all of those sorts of things. And we were using them as tools to solve a systems problem. And it was fun. People didn't care about their salary as long as they got one, because they actually were hopelessly engrossed in the job they did, in what they wanted to do. Now, because there's much, much more in terms of IT, it's pervasive, business IT, there are many, many organizations that are short of people who actually just work in that area, and they're not that exciting for these startups. The startup going from 50 to 100 to 200 to 400, that's an exciting place for a young person to work in.
Candice, that's very interesting what you said.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ian, and I think it comes down to, reverse engineering what are the skills you need for the future, right? Versus starting from where you are and thinking about, you know, just evolution, because it's radically different. And I think that, you know, what you talk about around why young people are attracted to these newer companies, there's a new model, there's a new operating model. These companies have left the industrial age. They're literally in the information age, and they're also living very, very comfortably in uncertainty. And so, you know, I think about my trajectory in my career, going from a very reputable consulting firm, you know, one of the top ones in the world, it's Monitor, and then working in the corporate world and then going to the startup world. It wasn't about learning new things. It was about unlearning many things that I had been told or I had learned. And, you know, we talk about the pandemic being a very interesting lesson for the world in how to manage, and I would, you know, and ultimately some people even thrive in uncertainty, change, and chaos. And that's what startups teach young people, because in startups, it's not linear. You don't have, you know, very linear planning. What you really have is experimentation and an appetite for failure and a desire for very, very quick feedback loops. And you learn completely differently, you know, in an environment like that than in an industrial linear planning cycle. And so, you know, if we really want to change, I agree with you. I think corporations have to start radically changing what their cultures are around uncertainty, change, and scale.
That's actually pretty good. That's some powerful point. So, you know, some of the questions we talked about, and I'm thinking, is this addressing why we are so bad at addressing the skills gaps or skills, if there is that problem, or is it the attitude? What is the actual, and why are we not making headway there? And part two of the question would be that if you are a corporate world in the government, what can they do from a standpoint of quality infrastructure or type of assistance they would give to make this move forward? Because it's not going to happen magically, right? So who wants to go first?
So maybe I can give you a little story. I was at a round table with a bunch of agriculture companies. Canada has 65,000 migrant workers a year that come to the agriculture sector. That's going to be drastically cut. You imagine you're running a large scale agricultural facility. You're going to now lose a huge number of workers. You're going to be thinking about automation. Automation in a year and a half is a nice to have to a must have. It's a survival now. You don't even know what skills you're missing, right? So I sat at a round table, people kept saying, I need artificial intelligence because I've heard that will solve all my problems. When you're doing this massive transformation of your economy, you imagine the agriculture sector, I don't know what percentage of GDP is, but it employs a lot of Canadians. It's a big industry. It's doing a very radical transformation pretty quickly. They don't actually know what skills they need. And so one of the things I realized is there's no mechanism to actually help them figure this out. And if you're a big agriculture player, are you going to make the capital investments in automation if you don't know you can get skilled employees? And if you're not, somebody isn't producing those skilled, see, it's a chicken and egg. You don't want to make the investment in automation because you can't get the employees. If someone's producing the employees for an industry that doesn't exist today, and yet this has to happen. And now you multiply that. You think about manufacturing, food processing. Every industrial sector is seeing the same phenomena at the same time. And they come from a world where, and I like what Ian said earlier, where kind of employees are a product, but they're not a product in this new economy. These are very highly skilled individuals. And so what is the system that allows them to make these transformations happen? That in some sense de-risks for them and for the worker, right? For a worker that you're reskilling into the agriculture sector, they need to feel there's a job. For the employer, they need to feel that they can get the people they need so they can make the capital investments. And we haven't thought that through very well.
Yeah. One thing I would add to that is, and I just spotted a comment from, I think it's Piers in the chat session. I think that I feel truly lucky in the first 4 jobs I had, because I had superb bosses. I really did. I'm not sure I let them know that at the time. I'm not sure that I was as good for them as they were for me, but they were superb mentors for my career, not just for the job I was doing for them at the time. And I think that it's very difficult for someone of my age to talk about youngsters. But certainly when I was young, and I still haven't got a clue what the direction of my career is or should be, or what I actually want to do. But I do think that very often people at 2021 do not have a good idea, a sound idea of what they want to do for the rest of their lives. I can quite understand that. So they actually need, I believe, they need employers who can give them that mentoring as a holistic person to work in this sort of industry. And that takes a lot from an employer to do if the employer believes, well, most people only stay 2 years, so why invest in them? But it is a personal investment, not a financial investment in terms of this training or that training. It's a personal investment in how can we make this person achieve what they want to achieve with their life, which hopefully will be with our company.
I hear where you're coming from. I would also really encourage young people to actually look at the people who they look up to, who they're inspired by, who actually are people who they want to become, and reverse engineer what these people did to get to where they got to. And, I think it is very much a matter of agency and whose responsibility is it to create your direction in life. And I asked peers, because he said, maybe we're missing some young people here. So I said, well, what are we actually missing? And one of the things I think he brings up in the comments is just direction and career planning. And the best way I would do that is actually giving access and exposure to people who are a little bit ahead in their careers to understand what they did, what mindsets they have, and what experiences and opportunities they were given. And the reason I don't put that in the corporation's hands necessarily is, as you say, we're living in a very different world. Like, we used to live in a world where you worked at a company and you worked there for 20 years, right? And you retired and you called it a day. And I just don't think that is the reality for young people. And I don't actually think companies are going to give you the best guidance, even though it's in order to give you what you need for your direction in your life. And so I think that's where it's really important that people, have access to different paths, because there are so many different paths beyond what is usually, advertised. I know when I left business school, I basically left with the belief that there's only two jobs. You become a consultant or you become an investment banker. And it was, wild to see, oh my God, there's so much more than what I've been shown. And I think today with entrepreneurship and with, specifically in tech, there are so many different career paths and a huge investment in lifelong learning. You'll have 7 or 8 careers over your lifetime, not just one.
Absolutely. One of the things that you have talked about, which comes loud and clear, and I would believe that's a very important one, which is mentorship, definitely is a key issue that we can drill down. But I look at my own personal example, it would probably apply to Arvind and everybody. I look at it this way, that, I was born in a different country. I have lived on 4 continents. When I came to Canada, other than I had come to visit, I didn't know what was in store. I never worried about it, because my thinking attitude was, it doesn't matter, whatever the heck it is, we're going to do well and we'll understand the challenges. That doesn't seem to be happening these days. That's one problem. The second problem, if Ian and you'll get a chuckle out of this. When I was doing my articleship with PwC, Westbrook Price in UK, they were making me go run tea and stuff like that. And I go, what the heck? I came to be a chartered accountant. They said, no, do that. And they would make me do this. And even if you were in Kenya or subcontinent in Asia Pacific, you are not doing one task, you're doing 20 different tasks, right? You are the cleaner, you are this, you are doing that. That is not how we do things now here. You are given this assignment, you do this, and so we've produced that type of one single threaded area like the COBOL program, right? And the problem is now causing problems, because now that's problem number one. The other area, and I want you to comment on this 2-3 things. The other one is at Visa, when I had many other responsibilities, but when I was global head of internal audit, I started to interview people who had quit, right? To find out why did they leave the job. Now we've talked about people move on 2 years and all that. They were not quitting the company. They were quitting their bosses. That is what it turned out to be, okay? And we don't talk about that enough, that was, so it goes through the culture. What are your views on that? What do you think about that?
Well, I think the last point about quitting your boss is absolutely true, but actually, I think that organizations do need a degree of churn in their staff.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, the question is how much, and whether you lose particularly key assets for the wrong reasons. I mean, we stick a barcode on a laptop worth $1,500, and we get upset if someone leaves it on a train and the item is lost, and yet organizations are quite happy to almost let someone leave and they'll recruit someone else. I'm not sure we've really worked that one out, or rather industry has worked out. Just everyone says people are our most important assets, but most organizations do not act as if they are. And what someone wants out of life is very different if they're 20 to 40, and what someone wants out of life changes throughout their working career. And I think the point Candice made is absolutely spot on. When I started work a long time ago, I had no belief I would have more than one career. But I think youngsters today, they want a variety. They want to see different careers. They will try different things. They're comfortable trying different things. The world has enabled them to try different things. And they need to be supported in that in some way, because not everyone can do it on their own.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
And look, the reality is that capital intensive companies survive a long time because you have to pay off the capital. Labor intensive companies go out of business much more quickly. So we talk about young people not having loyalty to their company, but it's very hard to have loyalty to a company when there's a reasonable chance the company will let you go, might get bankrupt, might downsize. I don't know, somebody else must know the statistics on companies that reach 50 employees, but I would bet at least 3/4 of them are going to go out of business. So if you're a young person, then it's natural for you to have less loyalty to a company that just can't by its structure have loyalty to you. Now, in that environment, how do you build a positive culture? That's something that we tend not to focus on in the entrepreneurship space. We don't focus enough on how you build a supportive environment when your company itself may not survive, and yet you want to support the people you're hiring. And I think this is a really interesting area of study. I've seen all these programs around helping young entrepreneurs build their company, just very little talk about how to create a supportive, positive work environment for your employees, knowing full well that you may not be where they are in 3 years.
That's, yeah. You want to add anything, Candice?
I'm on mute. I apologize. I think that's true in some ways, although talent is very, very competitive to get great talent. And I think one thing, is culture, that a lot of the startup community actually becomes competitive around, right? And so, I think on the one hand, there are accelerators, helping the entrepreneurs, but I know the best entrepreneurs are the people who create the best cultures for young people to do their best work. And what that often is having a greater purpose, right? Doing something that young people care about that's going to have some impact in the world, and creating the conditions for young people to really thrive. You just need to look at Shopify as an example and how important culture is there. And, you know, even Wattpad is a great example. Like, I got to do some of the best work of my life with some of the smartest people in the world on a problem that, you know, had a big impact and had a lot of purpose. And so bigger companies are it's difficult for them to compete with that. But it's really important. If you want to get young people engaged, you have to create the conditions for them to be successful and thrive. And I think we can learn a lot from that, actually. And a big part of it too is giving people opportunity, right? To flex new muscles, as I think you said, Arvind. It's essential that people get the ability to try new things and fail and still be okay.
And that goes to the culture and thinking.
And we need more emphasis on that. We really need to. I like what you're saying, Candice, that actually if you do a case study, the companies that do better are the ones that create great culture. And maybe we don't put enough emphasis on that for young startups, to point out that that's a big part of your success metric. Create the right culture inside your company, because your employees will help you succeed then.
Right. Yeah, because if something goes wrong, we're always trying to blame somebody rather than understand the process and saying, where did the process go wrong and fix that? Yeah, sorry, you're going to say something.
I was only going to say, sorry, I was just going to dive in and say that I don't disagree with any of that. I totally agree with it. But one of the things that by implication is you're looking for the top talent. And if it's a normal distribution, the top talent may be the top 4% of the workforce. What are we going to do to enable, develop the 96% that are not the top talent? And that's I think in many ways that's a bigger and more important issue, because actually the top 4% are going to survive and do well and thrive and become entrepreneurs and work for the best companies and do the best work anyway.
I certainly have a perspective on that. I mean, I think we actually have to leave the mindset, right, that there's scarcity. And you actually have to move to a more abundant mindset, that actually the challenge is the mindset that we instill in people to say there is only 4% of top talent. The truth is, and I do a ton of this work, we have not invested in a growth mindset in our culture. You just need to look at certain ecosystems. Israel is a great example of a very, tech savvy ecosystem where that 4% is basically 50% of that population is in high tech and is, invested in with the, technical skills as well as the mindset of creating growth. And so fundamentally, that's the exact problem, which is we only think that 4% of the population is capable. I would argue, and I mean, I'm a big believer in this through my work at Game Changer and what we're doing at Mastermind, giving a platform for anyone to create learning experiences. We're missing the boat. We're missing the idea that we are far more capable than we think if only we change the mental models and mindsets around talent.
Actually, there's no evidence. There's no evidence. I mean, I don't even know how you quantify person A is better than person B. And I don't think there's really strong evidence that there's a certain elite group. It's just circumstances that people are put into that creates opportunities for them. And I think this is a really interesting area to, can you create a growth mindset? And can you do it not just at age 20, but at age 40? I actually, and maybe it's because I'm getting older, I like to believe people can learn their whole life. They can change their whole life. They can contribute their whole life. I think that one of the fallacies in the tech space is that you're over the hill when you get to a certain age. People at 50 have a huge amount to contribute to the tech space. And when companies are growing and becoming businesses with revenue and profits, they need people who are experienced. And those people can have a huge contributions to make. And so if somebody is making a contribution as very technical savvy on a particular piece of software versus helping build a business and grow your market, they're contributing in different ways. And you need this cacophony of different skills
I like the concept of generating this growth, because I think you're absolutely right. I think a large proportion of the workforce is forgotten at the moment in what we are generally in what we're doing. I know there are examples where that's not the case, but in general, there is this mindset that a large number of organizations are not doing what is necessary to generate that sort of growth environment.
Without going into names, one organization which had about approximately 40% turnover, 40%, and top guys didn't care because they are a billing organization, right? And so they bill people out and this, they don't care. But in a real organization, it's about 18 months before the person's ramped up to really be fully useful, understanding and all that. So you're talking about 1.5 years fully allocated costs for that person when they quit. Now, if they're useless, you already figured that into that. They're useless because that's not their skill sets for that particular job or whatever. Nobody's useless, but in that particular role. Then you look at, this is a government entity, and I was talking to the top boss up there, and we were talking about this certification and all that. Can you imagine? They're saying every single one of ours would fail this thing that you got here, but they can run everybody under the table as how good they were, even against people who were holding certificates. So what does it tell you? It tells you that they were really kind of people who went to University of Life, which is mentorship, which is everything you talked about, allowing them growth, allowing them to make mistakes, and they learn. That culture needs to change. I mean, the whole day we talked about today about how does Canada come out of this and move forward. We're going to need these people, right? If we don't do that, where are we going to get all this talent from? Because right now, the government next door, they created a situation. That's why people are coming here. Now, if Biden keeps doing what he does, then people might turn and say they want to go there. If that happens, we will lose the talent, not so much. And so we need to do a hell of a lot more. And I think the government will have a role. I give you one example. I would like you to comment on that. That both the governments, the US has done it and Canada has done it. That, this business is in trouble. I'll give you, stay at home. Here's your money. And so they're doing $1.9 trillion. We've done quite a bit. Why are we not thinking about the fact that, hey, if you learn a new skill or somebody hires you for this job, we'll pay them, right? So you still get paid money, but you're doing a job, you're learning something different, not what you did before, right? Would that not work? What do you think? It doesn't have to be this concept, whatever you, from a government standpoint. What do you think, Candice?
Maybe I'll go next. I'm not sure.
Okay. Ian, you talked about it a little bit, right?
I still think, and I may be wrong, but I still think there are elements of working in technology that require certain ways of thinking, certain core skills, certain core ideals, behaviors.
Right.
I think that they're either part of your makeup, part of the way you've been brought up, part of the education you have received. I still think that many of those things are necessary. I think some of them are difficult to transfer in later life. Having said that, I totally agree with what Arvind said earlier on, which is that people can learn all the way through life. But just to try and inject a little bit of humor into this, because of the problems with COVID, the UK government decided to put out an advert, and it had a picture of a ballet dancer it was definitely diverse and all the rest of it. So this was this ballet dancer called Fatima, and it says her next job is in cyber. Needless to say, the internet responded, and they showed a picture of the Cybermen from Doctor Who, and said, the Cyberman's next job is in ballet. and the reality is, I mean, they pulled the advert in the end because it caused so much amusement more than anything else. Yes, we're going to have diverse careers. Yes, we've got to find the right way of making sure we get skills and keep those skills throughout later life. continually develop them. And yes, I'm actually with Arvind on this. I do think, and that's because I didn't do much in the arts when I was younger. I do believe people need a much more rounded background to be able to perform and be flexible in the workforce going forward. And how we actually make that happen, I don't have all the answers, but I think it's something to strive for.
Yeah, interesting. Arvind?
Yeah, so look, I think that this separation we've made, you know, we have this kind of, we think first you go to school, you learn, then you get a job, and then you retire. We're not, I think in this new economy, learning and doing and experiencing are all getting interblended. So part of who I am is somebody who's learning all the time. I'm learning new things. I'm doing new things at work. Mixing work and play together. So all these things are being blended together. Now, how do we create a system that's always giving me the ability to learn, giving me the ability to seamlessly, you know, if I am at a tech company and tech companies go under, this is part of the space we're in, and allows me to transition to somewhere new without being a threat. I shouldn't be scared that something is going to go terribly wrong. I should relish the fact that I'll always be able to learn something new, even when I'm making a job transition. And what is the role of society in facilitating those kinds of transitions for me? You know, let's think about it a little differently. We talk about a highly skilled workforce, but think about you buy an expensive car. If you don't maintain that car, it's not going to last that long. Like the more sophisticated the car, the more maintenance you have to put into it.
Right.
The human beings is pretty sophisticated instruments that are contributing huge amounts to the economy. We have to maintain them. We have to give them all sorts of facilities to grow. We have to make sure that we create pathways for them because they are big generators of what we're looking for as a society. And this idea that they're cogs, or that, you know, if they don't know this exact thing, they're not useful to us, or they're too old, or whatever else, you know, these preconceived notions we have of people, we're hurting ourselves as a society. Instead, we should think of people as the most, you know, we say the words, people are the most valuable resource we have. If another politicians say this all the time, my question is, are we investing in people throughout their whole lives? Or are we saying, you turn 22 and our job is over, invest in you, now it's your job to figure it out. But we as a society lose when those people aren't growing. And if we believe as a society, we're all in this together, we're all benefiting, I benefit if Ian does better and Ian benefits if I do better, so now I have a vested interest in investing in Ian. So we should have an interest in investing in each other. How we do it, I think, is the question that we need to ask. What are the facilities that government needs to create to make sure we're investing in people all the time?
Candice, now you had a chance to hear all that. So
you know, it's interesting. I'm an immigrant, right? And I always start my story with the fact that I'm an immigrant because my parents left everything behind, you know, to create a better life for us here. And the reason I say that is because in Toronto, there's 50% first generation immigrants. 50%, that's a huge number, you know? And I think it really is a wonderful place for people who have the drive to want to, you know, have a better life. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that very much in tech actually right now. And I think it goes two ways. I think one is, how do we create a culture that's more interested in growth and creativity and creating, and, you know, a environment in our companies and in education that enables and allows for that versus stunts that. But I actually think that it's up to the individual, you know, to have the agency. And what we want to do is take all of the barriers out of the way. So it shouldn't just be for the elite few who have access and exposure, right? But if you're somebody who wants to invest in yourself and create these new skills and do that along your life learning journey, you know, we shouldn't stand in that way. But I don't think it is the responsibility of others to do that. It's the responsibility of others to take the roadblocks out of the way for the people who are driven to continuously grow.
fantastic. Now that we're out of time, but here's, if you were the boss and had a magic wand, what are the key things you would address? 30 seconds each. so that we can say, where would you put, if you had now only have X number of things to do, Arvind, go for it.
Well, I like the idea of engendering a culture change in this new economy so that we value people and all they can contribute and don't see them as just for the particular skills they have.
Fantastic. Candice, you want to go? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is return on learning, right? Like giving people the opportunities to grow and learn with like real practical work opportunities for growth, as well as, you know, I'm in the business of creating a platform for anybody to create learning experiences and courses, and making sure people have access to the best experts in the world, that they can take those courses from wherever they are, and companies to invest in people's learning. So I think those would be the two things I would say. Fantastic.
Ian, my friend.
Well, first of all, I totally agree with Arvind. Since he's stolen my thunder on that, I'll come up with something else. I'll take it back one step from that. Inevitably, if you're going to create the culture within an organization, you are that organization. And one of the things I think we've talked about, an asset register for with regards to cybersecurity. I think we need an asset register for the skills of the people that you've got. And I'm bound to say that because we have a skills framework. But at least then there's a common basis to talk about skills from. And the benefit of that is if people are talking about skills, I actually believe things will change. At the moment, all we are saying is there's a skills gap. That's not the same as talking about skills.
Fantastic. And I do know this SFIA framework is fantastic. And if you guys agree, here's what I think, because there's some powerful stuff you're part, some we didn't get into. If you agree, as you know, we do that conversation. I will bring you each at your timing that you're available for 1 hour almost to have the conversation. You can drill down, right? Because there's a lot of things here that you've parked. And of course, we're recording this video, so I'll make it available to all of you. So you can take a look at it and say, okay, these are the 5 things I can drill down on. And we also want to talk about SFIA in greater detail, right? Because we've talked to the top, so we can do it over the next few days as you're available. If you guys agree, we will do that because there's some fantastic stuff that we've talked about. We haven't totally drilled down, but we've touched them, right? Would you make sense, Arvind? Right? Ian, agreed?
Yep.
And then Candice, yeah? Okay, I will. It's been a fabulous conversation. Thank you very much for all of you, to Candice, to Arvind, and Ian. I know it's late at night for you also. And so I thank you very much for doing it. The fact that you haven't fallen apart is great. So we will definitely do that. I truly appreciate it. We'll be in touch. And I think the next session would be worth to attend is what Pallet and Arvind's team have done. And these are not cybersecurity people. That's the interesting thing. They took people who were not cybersecurity people, who were other, qualifications, PhD, whatever, and they brought them in, and you will see the result for yourself. So I think there's a kind of talks about some of the things we talked about here. So that's fantastic. Once again, thanks very much, and we'll get the next. All the best, Candice. Thanks, Arvind. You can stay on.
Thank you. Bye.
And Ian, take care. All the best.
Bye.
Thank you. And Ian, I won't bother you tonight, but if you stay on, I'll hopefully chat with you tomorrow, right?
Okay, fine.
So take care. All the best. Now,
cheers. Thank you.
Bye.